this whole thing, it's just the way it hits me. This is a moment, as I described on the as our next guest FP calls it, the handoff thingy.
Yeah.
I described it as not sad, but a moment where all of us get to express the emotion that we feel and have felt through the years. And for me, it's hitting in a way that is like, yes, there's that, I guess we'd call it sadness, like there's that sort of well up your eyes type of emotion. But I also just feel such joy because he did, because that's what he meant to me. Is somebody who just exuded joy in playing baseball, but also meeting people. And why don't you go ahead and share the story right now, FP, of when this guy came up to you in the clubhouse and told you, I listen to your show every night.
Oh, well, thanks for having me on, guys. And it was a sad day for me yesterday because like, when you're a kid and you're going to games at Candlestick Park, and you're a Giants fan and you grew up a Giants fan, you like in my wildest dreams that I ever think I would become friends with the greatest player ever. So, I mean, just to get to talk baseball with him and be around him. And half the time I did, I really didn't hear what he said because in my mind, I was thinking, this is Willie Mays. And, you know, he had that much of a presence, but while he had that presence, he also had the presence of being your friend. And you guys have all met great athletes and superstars, and sometimes we're all fanboys and we're starstruck. I never felt that way around Willie completely. He just had this way of making you feel like he was just another one of the guys. Like he was the 25th guy on the roster, and here he is, maybe the greatest player ever. But I mean, not to make this about me, but as a tribute to Willie and to show you what kind of guy he was. I'll never forget, it was maybe my first or second month with the Giants, and it was a day game at Candlestick, and I'm sitting there eating my, powdered scrambled eggs and burnt bacon before the game. No offense, Murph, but Murph wasn't the greatest cook in the world. And I'm sitting there at the table, and I was playing that day, and usually when I played, it wasn't like yuck it up at the table. I had my game face on, and I was thinking about maybe the pitcher or the at-bats or whatever. And Willie asked me if he can sit down at the table with me. And I look up and the guy asked me, and it's Willie Mays. The greatest player ever asked me if he could sit at the table I was at. Like usually that just doesn't happen. You know, somebody just plops down and sits. And I said, of course. And he sits down and we're talking about center field. And he starts to tell me about the wind currents at Candlestick Park. And he said, well, you know, if it goes to right center, you got to get on your horse. That's where it really carries. So anything hits your left, you got to really giddy up and go after it. He goes, if it hit to left center, it knocks it down at Candlestick. And, you know, you'll start to go back, but then you got to come in. And he went on and on with just the best clinic of wind currents and how to play one of the toughest center fields ever in the history of baseball, one of the toughest outfields to ever play in the history of baseball. And all the while, I'm sitting there thinking, this is the greatest player ever. Willie Mays is giving me tips on how to play center field at Candlestick. So while I was soaking it up in one ear, the other ear's not even paying attention because I just can't believe I'm having breakfast with Willie Mays. And I think, you know, the best way to pay tribute to somebody like that is to paint a picture of the man that he was. And like I said on my Instagram post last night, like I never saw Willie play. And everybody says he's the greatest there ever was. The Willie Mays I know was the man, and he was still the greatest there ever was. So the other story, you guys, that I shared on my Instagram post last night was I had just started out on a night show in my broadcasting career, the nightly radio show that I did in 2009 and 10. And I was walking the Giants clubhouse one day, and he was in Murph's office. And I said, hey, Willie, we used to call him Say Hey. Charlie Hayes used to scream it across the clubhouse, say hey. And that's all we used to call him, say hey. And I'd say, hey, what's up? He's like, I listen to your radio show every night. You know what you're talking about. I was like, oh, my God. You know, Willie Mays listens to my radio show. And he did. He wasn't full of crap. Like, he listened. He knew some things that I talked about the night before, doing the post-game show after the Giants game, and even just doing a normal radio show. So, you know, as a fledgling broadcaster and just starting out in the industry, to have the greatest baseball player of all time and listening to your show on the way home from the game just gave me the ultimate confidence. So, I don't know. Willie's the best. It was a sad day yesterday. Still fighting to get through it today. When I hang up with you guys, I'm jogging down to Willie Mays Plaza and I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, FP Santangelo here on Willard and Dibs. And it's funny when you said, not to make it about me, but I was telling Mark before, it feels like when something like this happens, it really is all about us, and it's about what Willie meant to you. And for those people who never met him, I met him once, and I'll never forget that moment in spring training. And all the other people who have connections through their dads or their grandpas, it really is about you. And just what is it about Willie Mays that makes that connection with all of us so powerful, even though some of us met him once or never at all?
I mean, he transcends the sport. There's certain athletes that, Willie Mays, in my opinion, was more than baseball, but everybody knew who Willie Mays was wherever around the world. I was trying to explain it to somebody today that wasn't familiar with the gravity of all this and maybe how much this meant to all of us in the Giants family. It was a sad day, and it's a sad time in the Giants family right now. But he was a Giant. He's the greatest Giant ever and the greatest player ever. But even Murph's story about, he was a bat boy when he was 14 or 15, and Willie was 25, and they became best friends. Came from New York together to San Francisco, and after a game one day, Willie says, "Come on, Murph, let's go." And they pull up this big driveway in Palm Springs after a game in spring training, and there's Frank Sinatra waiting for him. So it's Frank and Murph and Willie. But that's the rock star Willie Mays. But what he meant to everybody. I don't know. It was more than baseball, and with civil rights and the time he grew up in and what he had to fight against to get to the major leagues. And I don't know, man. He was just an everyday guy that was the biggest superstar. He was Jordan and everything all rolled into one. He was it back in those days. It wasn't like there's one guy for this sport, there's one guy for that. It was Willie Mays. It was Say Hey and that song. And kids used to throw rocks at his window. And he'd come out in the street in New York and he'd play stickball with kids before he went to the ballpark. Name me a guy that does that today.
Right.
So, I could go on and on, guys. It's just, and it kind of feels good. This is therapeutic for me to talk about it. I wasn't ready to last night because I was in a really emotional state, and I got a lot of text messages and phone calls from different outlets that might have been going for clicks, but you guys are family to me, and it's an honor to be able to share this with you and the listeners today.
Oh, it's an honor to have you on, for sure. FP Santangelo with us here on Willard and Dibs. I think a lot of us are also struck by the timing. How could you not be? Today is Juneteenth, and tomorrow is an MLB spectacle that in many ways was already so much about him. And for this to happen this week, I wonder how you see tomorrow maybe being even different than it was going to be because this happened now.
Oh, of course. It was going to be a celebration of Willie Mays, but now it's going to be a remembrance of one of the greatest players ever and what he meant to the sport. So it was going to be like, this is where Willie started. And, he was 16 years old in the Negro Leagues and just a high school kid playing professional baseball. And then he got drafted and played pro ball and the greatest player ever. And now it's going to be, more of a somber remembrance and a celebration, maybe almost like a wake in a sense, a baseball wake where we can remember more. I wish I'm big on celebrating people while they're alive, so that they could see it. Retiring people's numbers while they're alive so they can see it. Inducting people into the Hall of Fame while they're alive. We do that with some of the people that passed away so they can remember it. And I know it's a great honor for the families and the people and the legacy and what comes after him, but it's just a shame that I think Willie knows all this. But it's a shame that he couldn't see all this, what's going to happen tomorrow. And then just a side note, I think this is a wonderful thing that Major League Baseball has done. We criticize MLB for a lot of things, but to celebrate the Negro Leagues and to have a game in Rickwood where it all started for Willie Mays, they really knocked it out of the park in this one. I'm excited to see it tomorrow. Yeah,
and I do think that, Willie was probably super proud of what Major League Baseball has done and proud of himself for how far baseball and really the country have come since he had to, fight to get housing in San Francisco, and he had to wait to have somebody else break the color barrier before he could even play. You mentioned the sadness part of it, and I can't help but think about Barry Bonds not being in the Hall of Fame and that being something that Willie would have loved to be around and be alive to actually see when it eventually does happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's a shame, and I like your attitude when it eventually happens, because it's not the Hall of Fame until Barry gets in there, and that's Barry's godfather. And you know, when Bobby died, Barry took it real hard, and Willie was there for him. And Barry grew up in the clubhouse with Bobby and Willie, and you know, Willie was his godfather, and it was a hard day for Barry yesterday. We texted back and forth quickly, so it's a rough day for him as well, and. Yeah, it would have been nice if Willie got to see it, but I think Willie knows and Barry knows, and if I had to guess, I don't think they give a crap. I really don't. I think they both know they were two of the best players that ever walked the face of the earth, and they don't need some reporter that never played the game to validate that.
FP Santangelo with us here on Willard and Dibs. FP, I'm almost even struggling to figure out sort of how to package what I want to say next. But I mean, have you ever seen anything like this with regard, what's really standing out to me over the last day or so is the effect he had on people who never even saw him play. I don't know if I can compare this to anything. I've never seen someone whose time as a player was up before a group of people got to earth, and then all of those people were so affected by that player. I don't think that I can compare this guy to anyone.
Because we all hear the tales from our parents and our grandparents about the great Willie Mays and how he used to run with his back to home plate and make these wild catches, and how he'd be on third in the blink of an eye, and how he hit 600 home runs when Candlestick was wide open in a chain link fence and the wind was whipping off the bay. And we hear these legendary stories, right? So we have this picture in our mind, almost like how you paint the picture on radio, right? We fall in love with players on the radio that we've never seen before. And the pictures that my dad has painted about Willie Mays, or my grandfather who passed that saw him play, or even people in the Giants clubhouse that saw him. So now you see the video and it kind of blends with your thoughts and your vision of what he was like as a player. And then all of a sudden here comes this guy that's super humble and nice and kind and wonderful. So it just stamps what you think about him, and it just emblazes it in your brain that now he's not just a great player, and you hear the stories, but he's a great person too. So I really freaking like that guy. I never saw him play, but damn it, I really like him. And when he comes up to a part-time platoon player and sits down and has breakfast with him and tells him how to play the hardest center field in all of baseball, I mean, why wouldn't I love Willie Mays? And every time I got to see him, I know when the Nationals came into town, I was a broadcaster for them. They had a text message that Willie's going to be in the clubhouse today, and all the players were just like Disneyland, like they're going through the gates at Disneyland for the first time. They're going to the visiting clubhouse, and there was a procession, and everybody was going up and introducing themselves to Willie and taking the pictures with Willie. And I was introducing Willie to some of the guys, and he wasn't seeing too well back then, and we were taking a picture together. And I don't know if you guys saw the one I posted of us laughing.
Yes.
He said something to the fact that I can't even see the effing camera. I don't know where to look. And we both started cracking something to that effect. And we were laughing. We had a good chuckle about it. I said, I just look that way or whatever. But he's the best, man. And I don't know, Mark, if I answered your question properly, but we hear the stories, and then the person is better than the stories, and the persona is huge, but the person is humble and authentic. And I think in our world today, man, humble and authentic plays, and that's exactly what Willie was.
Man, well said. So you're not going tomorrow, but then you're heading out to St. Louis to do the weekend, yeah?
I'm going tomorrow, actually. I'm going to get in St. Louis a day early. But yeah, and I'm going to do the series there, and it's going to be an honor to be around the team. I thought, just a quick shout out to Dave, who on the broadcast I thought nailed the announcement. He showed true emotion and how much he loved Willie and the Giants. And I thought John Miller on the TV side last night, you couldn't ask for a better broadcaster to do that. The balance between the action and the tribute.
Seriously.
Those are things that are hard, guys. I mean, when you're on a live broadcast and you get some tragic news that you didn't expect and it buckles you, and there's a balance there, right, between the game itself and the tribute to Willie. And I thought just a shout out to both of those guys who are the most talented broadcasters in the business, and we have the best broadcast team in the business, and they just did a wonderful job last night.
Yeah, well put, FP.
And say hi to B. Craw this weekend.
I will. I'll say hi to him. I'll say hi to the guys. I'm excited to get there, and hopefully, let's get some wins, man. Let's go. I mean, the inconsistency and the heartbreak and the roller coaster, and Soler gets hot, but then this, and we don't even need to talk about the game today, but they need to be more consistent, man, because this team's a lot better than the record showing. And enough of these moral victories. There's no such thing as moral victories at the big league level. W's are W's and L's are L's.
A little sloppy today, and unable to really button it up, and you lose another series against a mediocre team. Thanks, FP.
All right, guys, have a good show. Thanks for having me on.
Travel safe, brother. Travel safe.
See you.